to Inquiring Minds. I'm Steve Harper. With me, as always, is my amazing co-host Donna Carlin. Donna, how are you today?
I am great. And how about yourself?
I am doing good. I am just loving, the conversations that we're having. It's the highlight of my week. I'm so grateful for these opportunities, and you always push me and challenge me. I have found myself going back and during the editing process, making so many mental and actual physical notes about just some of the great things that we're covering in these conversations. And so I am, I'm just so blessed to be a part of this process and so grateful for this opportunity to have these conversations every week.
I feel exactly the same way because it makes me reflect. And when I reflect, I know that I'm going to make better choices in life. That's the way I look at this.
Yep.
And any opportunity to have a conversation with you, I jump at. So we're good.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, what are we conversing about today?
Okay, ready, Steve?
Yep.
How do you use your voice?
Ooh, sometimes not in the best way, according to my wife.
Yeah, we can both go there.
And
My,
sometimes,
my
with
husband.
my kids.
Yeah.
How do I use my voice? Well, that is really an interesting conversation because it is. I don't know how many people actually think about that, right? How are we using this, to exact change, to inspire, to motivate, to share or sell an idea on a product or service? Your voice and how you deliver what your message is so critical. And that's just the business side, right? Then it's how we communicate and engage in our communities. And for what we're passionate about, nonprofit work, or maybe our own political viewpoints, or our own you know uh, topics that inspire and motivate us, and how we get that and communicate that out to actually share those ideas and those things that are impacting us, right? That's a critical factor as to how we communicate that to our personal and our professional networks, right?
I look at it as, do we use our voice to support someone? Do we use our voice to knock someone down?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do we use our voice to advocate for something that has huge meaning to us or that's really important? Or do we stay silent?
Yep.
Do we use our voice to honor our boundaries and to say no when something is just absolutely not acceptable
Yeah.
or not possible for us? Do we use our voice in a way that makes the other person heard? There are so many ways of looking at that
Sure.
question. How do
Yeah.
you use your voice? And, you know, if you use your voice on a regular basis, I'm not talking you here, I'm talking about the generic you,
Good.
to
Thank you. Don't throw me
complain
under the
on a
bus. I didn't.
regular basis. Yeah, to be the naysayer, the complainer, that as soon as Jane opens her mouth, it's going to be complaints left, right, and center. Then people will tune you out the minute they hear your voice.
Yeah.
Or if they know that you have something worthwhile to say and you use your voice to spread that worthwhile message, then you will be listened to, honored, and possibly engaged with.
Sure.
So it's up to you how you use your voice, how often you use your voice. It's so funny when I'm observing teams in session, and sometimes a client of mine will say, I had very little, to say because most of the topics were not within my purview, but because he was part of an executive committee, he was obviously there for hot issues or whatever meeting there was. And what did you pick up? Because it became almost like I know what I picked up. What did you pick up? And it was like, well, did you notice that so and so had to say something just to be heard with nothing of value what to say whatsoever? And if this is what a colleague is saying, you better believe other people around the table are saying, when this person talks, there's nothing, no
Yeah.
meat
No
to it
substance.
whatsoever.
Yeah. Yep.
As opposed to this person who doesn't speak very often. And when she does, it's something incredibly valuable. We need to listen.
Yeah.
So, how and when are you using your voice? That's the second question. And the third one is, to what end? For the sake of what?
Yep. I love that because I think thinking about one of the sayings that we've all heard, which is the voice of reason. when you're in a team environment, right? Somebody that, like you
Yep.
said, doesn't speak often, but when they do, carries a lot of weight, brings a lot of emphasis or importance to the topic. And I think that one of the things that's pretty critical to me is that you make sure that you have confidence in what you're saying and what you're doing, right? That there's an alignment there. That the things that you are saying, you're like that situation you just sort of shared, where people are talking just for the sake of talking and they're not saying anything of meaning and of value. And I think it's important for you to, and I've told people before, you don't really need to speak until you have something to say. And you have something to say because you've been listening to everybody else have the conversation, and your points or your opinions or your approaches and how you deliver and ultimately how you communicate that to the rest of the group carries a lot of weight and a lot of power. And it's so important for you to be cognizant of that, right? And I think that is kind of key. And like you said, what is my end game, and what is the what am I trying to impact with my my attitude, my approach, my direction or thought process. And being in a situation where you can be one of the more thoughtful voices in a room can be one of the most powerful positions to ever be in.
Yes, absolutely. And also look at what are you sharing and how. So
Yes.
how you use your voice also goes to, does it have meaning for the other person, or is it all about you? If it's all about you and the context doesn't call for it to be all about you, you're going to lose the other person.
Yeah.
So if you make it meaningful for the person who's listening to you, because there's some connection in some way, shape, or form, that's what we do at TED.
Yeah.
It's to say, how do you embed an idea in somebody's mind when everyone in the audience is coming from a completely different background? Because in some way, shape, or form, it applies to them and it applies to somebody in their lives, in their communities, whatever it is, or the
Yeah.
world as a whole. So they pay attention and they do something with it, because that's the whole point of spreading an idea.
Yep.
You also look at, um, and I mentioned this to you earlier, for people who are writing stories about a part of their lives that they want to share with the world, because they think that the world would benefit to know what's really going on behind the scenes or whatever else. Put yourself in the story, because if it's your
Yeah.
personal experience, don't look at it as if your camera's looking outwards and you're sharing everything that's going on and there's no emotional attachment from you, the actual person who's there witnessing, engaging, and everything else in that horrific experience or incredible experience. Let them see it through your eyes in a way that helps them relive it with you.
Yeah.
So your voice is the best tool that you have to connect,
Yep.
to engage, to bring curiosity to a conversation, to bring a different perspective, better perspective, as I call it, to the conversation. Like the viewpoints will expand. So your view of the world will not be this, it'll be all encompassing. And that's the whole point. What are you contributing that has not yet been shared?
Yep. Yep. One of the things that you touched on with the TED Talk, it's interesting because most of those conversations, from the stage are uh, topics that are covered in a very brief period of time, right? But the expertise and the knowledge that's being shared by the presenters, it's top notch, and they have to get very clear and concise about what they're communicating because the clock is ticking. It's a very small window to communicate some very big ideas, to inspire and motivate somebody to think about something that they didn't walk into the auditorium necessarily thinking about. And so, how do you bring somebody into that moment in a way that allows them to, wow, I never even thought about brain surgery. Let me, I didn't even know that this was, something that I, would have interest in, or that it would be something that, I would ever think I might want to know more about or face in my own life. Right. And there's such a variety of topics that TED has that, but almost every single one of them are presented in such a way that makes you want to be curious. And there's a lot of lessons that can be learned about that, which is, You don't have to, it's not the volume of words that you share, it's the delivery and the expertise and the conviction that you have behind the words. And I just think it's my wife says something that I should pay attention to a lot more, but this is a great opportunity to put it out there, which is, when you communicate, is it true? Is it hurtful? Is it necessary? Is it helpful? Right? And you look at it, there's probably, I think she actually has a one that kind of flows a little better than that, but really those are the four key points. And it really is an opportunity for you to take a bit of a time out and say, before I say something, is this an opportunity for me to hit, what I really intend to hit? And if it's going to work against the situation, work against the relationship, work against the conversation, and it's not supportive and it's not helpful and it's not necessary, then is it really need to be communicated? Just because you thought it doesn't necessarily mean that the world needs to hear it, right? And so I think about that in that regard as to, when you're, and we've talked about this. We talked about this on one of our first episodes, tung fu and being cognizant of the words and how you use them and how they're perceived by the world. And you can't convince everybody, and you can't, necessarily, expect everybody to embrace everything that you're saying out there in the world. But when you become one of those people that really does carry power behind how they communicate and how they leverage and utilize their voice, your status just raises so much in people's mind and perception that when you do finally get an opportunity to share a few thoughts and an idea, people really want to be sucked in to pay attention to what they're, what you're sharing, because they want to know.
That's it. The reflective questions. We always talk about that. And one of the previous episodes, we talked about what is the question you need to hear right now,
Yep.
and what's the question you need to ask yourself right now is also very relevant. And the one that's always on back of my mind is, how do I want that person to feel at the end of the conversation? And if I
Yep.
answer that question, everything I say is going to be filtered through that. So even if it's a critical conversation, I'm using my voice to set my boundary, to keep my boundary, to say no. I still want the other person to feel heard, respected, and honored.
Yep.
Period. If that person's a jerk to me, then it's a different response. It's still one that maintains my integrity, though. My voice is used in a curiosity way, in a way, by saying, "Could you repeat what you said? Because I can't believe that I actually heard you right."
Yeah.
It's in other words, it's telling the other person that what they said was so unacceptable that I need a repetition because it sort of shocked the heck out of me, right? And if they answer the same way, most of the time they won't say it again because they realize that they sort of screwed up. However, when they do say it again, my response is always, "Oh, I did hear you right," and I won't respond, because I won't respond to something that is completely unacceptable, because that gives it weight. So I don't want to be that person that gives weight to something that's inappropriate. So
Yeah.
how do I want somebody else to feel at the end of the conversation? How am I using my voice to build or demolish,
Yeah.
to
That's a
to
great point.
support or to cut at the knees?
Yep.
And even if they're not doing a good job, how am I going to have that conversation so they go back to what we talked about earlier, like in a previous episode? Can they be curious about who they could become rather than stuck on the judgment that they are not worth anything?
Yeah. Yep.
So,
What?
that's for another conversation, I
That's a whole
think.
nother deeper dive conversation for sure. But
That's right.
if you
Yeah.
if you think about it, just because maybe up to this point you haven't thought about how you use your voice, how people perceive it, how impactful it might be, doesn't necessarily mean that you can't start today thinking about, how am I going to go. I've heard Donna and Steve, and this has really inspired me to think about how I carry my voice and where I want to, invest it, and how I want to contribute out there in the world for potentially, hopefully, the betterment of a situation, a betterment of a team, furthering an idea, or simply, sharing your 2 cents, or like you say, 3 cents. But
If it's in the
thoughtful.
dollar.
With inflation now, it's gone up, right?
Yeah.
So but being intentional about that process, I think, is super key. And I don't think a lot of people actually think about that. And I think it's really critical for us to take a time, sort of a time out and think about, okay, from this point forward, if I was going to be intentional about how I use my voice, and if I was going to be looking at it for whether it's contributing and being helpful and adding value, but I kind of remove all the superfluous stuff from the rest of the dialogue, how much more impactful could that possibly be?
And remember that applies to email as well, not
Yes.
just the spoken word.
Yes.
People tend to be very abrupt in their email, and you feel like you've been frozen at 20 paces. So consider that as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you think about it, it's like, hey, Donna, I'm going to be 2 minutes late to our recording. And I get an email response from, oh, okay. And the perception is, oh, I got one, two little letters, O and K. Is that perceived as, now you're angry and upset because I'm not going to be there on time, or is it really okay? You don't really know, and it is. So when you look at that, kind of an interesting, sort of side, approach to this topic is how people see you in real life and how you communicate with them carries over into how that text or that email may be perceived. Knowing you as I do, if I was going to be 2 minutes late, okay just means, all right, see you when you're there, right? As opposed
Yeah,
to, ooh, I have really made her mad because I was not on time, right? So it's important, and that's a really valuable point you made, and that is probably directly proportionate to how your voice is being, how you're using your voice out there in the world, as to how people perceive you both verbally and in writing.
that's right. It's open to interpretation, and it's usually not the good stuff.
That's right.
That's why, seriously, if, when somebody says they're going to be late, my answer is always no worries. Thanks for letting me know.
Yep. Yep. Not okay. You're not the okay person I was
I'm
falsely
not the
accusing.
okay person. No, it's no, usually no worries.
No
Yeah,
worries, which tells you everybody's, laid back and doesn't have a worry that you're going to be late as long as you're coming. That's all that matters, right?
that's it.
Well, this has been a really good topic. I think, like you said, I think there's actually a couple of different, uh, you know, uh, conversations that could spin out of this, because I'm curious to see what our listeners and our audience think about this topic, because uh, again, I believe, based on, my own, sort of observation of my own coaching clients and even folks that I engage with in my company, we don't spend a lot of time. We don't spend enough time thinking about how we utilize our voice, and is it being perceived the way we really think it should be perceived, or have we even taken the time to even care, right? And I think that's kind of a first step.
It's very powerful. So use it to empower.
Yep. Absolutely. Love that. So, Donna, as we wind down this episode, can you tell everyone how they might get involved to share what their thoughts are on this particular topic, and how this conversation has gone, and give us their 3 cents, or a dollar worth worth of input, and
Dollar.
maybe topics that they'd like us to cover in the future.
Join our Facebook group, Inquiring Minds with Donna Carlin and Steve Harper. Let us know what you think, what you've used, what you want us to talk about, anything else about yourself. We'd love to know more about you, and join the conversation, and help us help you. That's the
Absolutely.
bottom line. You could subscribe to our YouTube channel under the same name, or get to us through our websites. Steve is at rebelcentral.com. I'm at Donna Carlin with a K.com. And let us know, what you'd like us to discuss. Let us know if you want us to come and speak to your organization, because we do that as well,
Yep.
and cause trouble in real time. So it really works well. And actually, it works well because it's a conversation with the people there around topics that really impact everyone in every stage of their life.
Absolutely.
So, and it's a lot
Like
of
you
fun.
said, I mean, this is an opportunity for us to have an engaged conversation in a real time format with your team, and that to me just seems so much fun.
That's it, exactly. So it's
Absolutely.
good.
Well, Donna, thank you so much for another amazing episode. I really love these conversations. It's the highlight of my week, and I can't wait for the next one. So I will see you next
Me
week.
too. Have a great one.